Welcome everyone to Your Body Awakening series. I have with me the wonderful AliMezey. She'll be our speaker for today. And she is a wonderful body therapist. She facilitates family constellation work as well as walking in your shoes. She is certified by the state of California as a sexological body worker. And yes, welcome.
Thank you. It's so good to be here with you.
Thank you. Likewise. I guess I want to start with asking you, how did you become a body therapist? Like, how did everything started?
I was injured early. I've had many physical injuries. I was a dancer, and I also had early sexual trauma. So it was a lot of things going on in my body from a very early age. And then I started to discover massage therapy. And it was such a huge relief that later, several years later, when I was taking a break from college, I decided to have a trade that involved my love of the body and my exploration in how we're related to it and how we are it or not. So it started a long, long time ago.
Awesome. I would like to know, because this is the first time I hear about family constellation work. And I'm sure many of our audience do not know what that is. Can you please explain?
I would love to. And by the way, it's going to be something that people will hear a lot more about. It's much more well known in Europe, where it originated, in Germany, and it's really spread through Europe and a lot of South America and Asia. And so a lot of continents are finally picking it up and really getting to know it. What we do is we look at the hidden loyalties in our family systems that we might be living out through love, basically. So a lot of the things we think of as our own personal issues or due to our difficult family childhoods or early lives are actually functioning out of loyalty for a larger family system. So it's this beautiful method by which we can really externalize what's going on in the subconscious, our personal subconscious, but also the family subconscious, and really see and feel and experience what has been blocking us or how we've been too connected to some things and not connected enough, so that we can really bring through the flow of love throughout our lives. And I am particularly using it with sexual compulsion and dysfunction. And I just started working with the drug addicts in a rehab center to really look at how these drugs are functioning for people, so that they can find other ways to support themselves and to find resources so that drugs are no longer needed for themselves and for their family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you say that, because not one method works for everyone, and sometimes they need a deeper work that will do the trick for them.
For sure, and that's the thing. I mean, I love talking and talk therapy, but also with this method, as well as walking in your shoes, it is so body based, and it really allows the brilliance of the body to find a language through which to speak, so that all this understanding, because of course the body's been with us in every moment of our lives, and it carries the genetics and the emotional experience of our ancestors. We are the blood and the bones of our predecessors. So it has all that history within us, but it doesn't have language in the way that we're used to using language anyway. So every method I use is very much about how can we allow the body to communicate the genius that it is.
There was, it's really important what you say. There was a quote that I read, and I don't remember exactly the exact words, and tell me if you agree with this, but when somebody works on healing themselves, they're also healing the generations before them from whatever trauma that was basically pass down.
Absolutely. And that's why I love particularly these people that I spend a lot of time with, is what people call these addicts, is because I find them to be the most courageous people, usually within their families, because that, even though they're usually perceived as being the screwed up ones, they tend to be the people who are the most sensitive in the family and the most willing to look at whatever is supposedly just theirs. But as you say, it's really not just shifting the family system. I'd even go so far as to say, I think what you're doing and what people are here doing who are drawn to listen, I believe we're transforming the whole planet as we work with our own trauma. It's not just our individual trauma. So I have great reverence for people who are really willing to look in their shadows and feel their way through it, so that we can all live much more comfortably and fully as a body.
Yes. It does take a lot of courage and
It does.
intimacy with yourself.
Yeah.
So I would like to know, the clients that you receive, that you work with, in particular women, what are some of the issues they bring up to you when you are having a session with them?
So one of the main things is lack of familiarity. You know, we're most of us are not raised to be exploring our bodies, at least by the time we're 4 or 5. You know, I always delight in seeing little children running around in their bodies, and they're trying them out and moving them around and, you know, exploring how they feel and doing all this weird stuff, which for them is normal. But as soon as you hit around 6 or 7, we start to straitjacket. And whether that corresponds with the time we go to school or, you know, a variety of different influences, but we start to shut down our bodies and feel it less and less. And then of course you add trauma in there, it's going to be become all the more distant, and for many people dissociated. So I would say lack of familiarity, due to just priority and education and culture. And people know that they're missing out. They know that they're not feeling what they want to, or they're not really knowing even how to explore their bodies. And that can be their flesh, it can be their emotion, it can be a variety of things. Another issue is, of course, what we were already talking about, just trauma. Like people are really suffering, and or they hate their bodies, and they're just constantly upset about the body that they live with and are. So that's another big issue. And there's plenty of others, but sometimes it's also that I find a lot that, again, people they know they're not really feeling themselves. So something I'm particularly interested in is, how do I help a body feel itself again? In a variety of ways, not just sexually, though, of course, that's also thing that all of us want, is to feel as much as possible. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's not true. There are a lot of people who don't want to feel that much. But so that's part of it too, is really understanding what is the goal that somebody wants. You know, is it just that they want to feel a little more safe, or is it they want to have full body orgasm? There's a huge spectrum in there, though of course safety seems to be the bottom line in all of that, is how can we feel more safe?
Yes, I absolutely love that you say that, because a lot of the how can I say, the trauma stays stored within our bodies, even if we forget about it. It still reacts. It's familiar with certain probably events or situations that wakens it in relation to, because it remembers the trauma that you lived through. So as somebody who specializes, a body therapist who specializes in clearing out sexual trauma, emotional trauma, and physical pain trauma, how do you approach your clients? How do you help them?
Well, first we talk, because without was going to say talk really helps to develop safety, which certainly it does. But I think the very first thing is for there to be a body rapport, so that as soon as somebody comes in, they know that they can resonate with me in a way that helps that safety begin to be available, to begin to be perceived even by their body. Because as soon as we come into contact with somebody, or sometimes even think about somebody, our bodies respond as the brilliant things that they are, and we know, well, I feel like I can start to let down my guard with this person, or I can't. So there's just that rapport that I would say is first and foremost. And then there's, I want to know also, because of course my mind is also engaged, and I want to know what happened and what is the priority, what is the goal. I usually always do a constellation with people so that we can externalize again. And I use sometimes just colored mats on the floor with people. Sometimes I use objects and symbols to again really see what hasn't been seen yet. What might be a different way to see and experience what we carry as our story, because there's always things that we don't see. And then the body presents us with, oh, there's actually this part or this piece or this perspective. And by the way, constellation work, people always think it has to do with astrology. It doesn't. It has to do with the geometry of relationship. So with when we externalize things, we can start to see what is our somatic relationship with other people and events and experiences. So there's that. And then if depending on if it's right for the client and me, I can do different kinds of body work, which involve just really learning how to experience what the experience is in a safe environment, whatever it is. Is there sadness that comes up when you touch someone's shoulder? Is there anger? Is there rage? Is there terror? And when you have somebody there to help regulate you, you can really have more ease in what needs to be felt and what needs to be witnessed and what needs to be loved, really. And from there, there's so many different ways. There's just feeling more of the body. There's body mapping. There's, again, feeling what comes up emotionally. And little by little transforming the experience of the body as being painful emotionally or physically, with relearning its capacity for pleasure. And again, safety. I keep using that word, but it really is about that.
It is important, and part of that feeling of insecurity is why people numb down their wanting to feel. It's like their defense mechanism in order to not feel whether it's the hurt they experience, the pain, or the sadness they experience.
And that's the irony, and the unfortunately is when there's been trauma and we get overwhelmed with too much stimulus, too much pain, we'll tend to dissociate from the body, when the body is really where you can experience the most safety if you really drop into it. The lower you go in your body, my dear friend and mentor, Philip Shepard, who I highly recommend people explore his brilliant work, talks about really living from the base of your body, even below the dantian, and where people talk about a lot of living, just below the belly button. But he's talking about really going into the living and breathing from the pelvic floor, where that's where the safety can come from. But we think of safety as being something more like controlling our environment, when really it's more about engaging more with our internal environment.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you point that out.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we want to externalize the issue when really it's just ourselves, and it can be scary for people to dive that deep.
Yes.
For individuals that might need the help, but they're not quite ready to go to someone, do you have any tips or words of guidance you could provide them in order them to start clearing out some of the trauma they may have lived until they feel ready to actually come to someone like you, a body therapist for us.
Yeah, I think what's really important and what's helped me a lot is just lying quietly and beginning to breathe. I know people feel really goofy. I do it sometimes as well by making some sound, but it really can help um, to vibrate the body with a little sound, and that can just be humming, or that's partially why I think people ohm. I'm not a yogi by any by any means whatsoever, but there's a lot of just vibrating the tissues and the cells and the water in the body can really help to energize it and make it more available to feel. So you can lie and make some gentle sounds, and then just try stroking your own arm, for example, really gently, and see, because when you touch yourself, even if it's on your hand or your arm or your chest, it doesn't have to be genitals. That can be further down the line for people who want to continue in that exploration. You have your hand is feeling what you're touching, but what you're touching is feeling your hand. So it's a kind of this beautiful, you can sort of toggle between those two experiences of feeling how it is to feel, and notice if you can stay with it, and notice what comes up. Do you leave? Do you just check out and start thinking about what you have to do, or do certain judgments come up? Do you start to get afraid? Do certain emotions come up, or is there certain images that start to come? I know that happens with me when I get a massage, for example. I'll suddenly start seeing images that thankfully aren't trauma flashbacks or anything anymore. They're more like I can suddenly be on a street corner in some town or some country I've visited, or where suddenly a random memory will come up. And there's a lot of, I often don't know why at that particular moment, but I'm always fascinated by what the body, as you were saying, the tissues hold, they hold memory. And so I'm really curious about, what is my body remembering? Why that right now? So it's really about witnessing while you just feel whatever you feel.
I like that you mentioned this exercise because, we've talked about familiarity and needing to feel safe, and all of that exercise that you just described is helping a person connect with their body. So it's always a return to ourselves. And so that being said, I would like to ask you, in relation to experiencing pleasure, how important is it to be connecting with your body and being present within your body?
I don't think I can't feel pleasure without feeling my body. I think they're kind of almost one and the same. I mean, of course, you can, if you're connected to your body, you can also feel pain and nothing and all kinds of other things. But in order to feel pleasure, you have to feel your body, unless it's a different kind of pleasure. I mean, there's certainly emotional pleasure, and there's, mental pleasure and spiritual, there's different kinds of pleasure. But on a physical, sexual level, to feel pleasure, I think you've got to be able to feel your body. And I also, suddenly this comes to mind too. I think a lot of people, maybe particularly women, but not necessarily, feel their partner's pleasure more readily than their own, and they think it's their own, but it's really their partner's pleasure. And that's a really interesting thing too, is, how to bring it back into, and I think to feel pleasure, you've got to be willing to not feel pleasure, which is really upsetting. I mean, I can't tell you how many women, and myself included, can have felt or can feel so frustrated with not feeling more pleasure and think something's wrong, What's
Mhm.
wrong with me? I'm so screwed up. It's always going to be this way. And I know from my own journey, it does and can change. And yet, in order to make that journey, you've got to be willing to feel everything along the way, including at times no pleasure, no responsiveness, and just not freak out about that, but just
Mhm.
keep exploring. But did I answer your question, or is there?
No, no, that was great.
It's such a huge subject, the whole issue of pleasure. My gosh, Ah.
It is.
Because there's also, I mean, the other thing about pleasure is that you can feel it alone. Some people can feel more pleasure alone, but
Mhm.
not really experience it with a partner. And some people can feel it alone and don't ever touch themselves and need to be with a partner. And that creates other kinds of problems or challenges. So it's, I think it's so individual.
Mm. Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that because some people sometimes, because of the way they were raised or
Yeah.
whenever they learned about sexuality, they think there's like this one particular way they're supposed to feel or one particular way they're supposed to experience pleasure whatsoever. But as you said, it's different for everybody.
I think that this whole issue, and of course, the the what's the word, the monolith of porn now at this point
Mhm.
is all the more kind of imprinting people with believing that pleasure looks a certain way, and
Mhm.
that in order to achieve pleasure in that particular way, we have to function and look a certain way. And on the contrary, I think it is so much about whatever is true in any given moment. It's intimacy is about authenticity of whatever is happening. Sometimes somebody could be touching you and you feel like punching them in the face, and it's not them you want to punch, but it's that old body trigger that's coming up. And can you stay with that and not punch them, but be with, oh my God, I suddenly feel I'm feeling this urge to strike out, and then go underneath that. And can you cry in your lover's arms and then go back and go for another round of, and in my own experience, the more I allow those places, the more pleasure is then available, because my tissues have been honored. Whatever's come up has been honored in a way that, again, make them more available to then keep going on that river of experience. What's next? And how much of that can you share with somebody and be there for their experience too, as it comes up.
Mm. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Huh.
It's nice because your body is like it's your ally. It's always giving you feedback to what is happening with
Yeah.
you, even though it's might be painful or it's a positive feeling, but it's always there to inform you about where your attention has to go at this moment in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you've had how many years? 30 years of experience within the healing arts. Am I correct?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's like 35.
Oh,
Yeah.
35.
Yeah, I became a body worker when I was, really young. Yeah.
Okay. So how what
Yeah.
I'm curious to see to know like what type of your clients like what trying to find my words in terms of transformation, what are some of the transformations that you've seen in your clients that you've been really surprised of and just amazed by how from the first session being with you to them being saying I'm fine and like thanking you for
Hmm.
the work that you did for them. If you have any stories on top of your head you would like to share.
I don't know if I have a specific story, but actually, I just did a constellation with a man who was really suffering sexually, and one of the things, most of us have dealt with a lot of shame, or have shame, or have worked with our shame. around sex, about what we are or aren't or think we should be. And this particular man had been working for so many years to try to deal with his shame. And the constellation showed, actually, this might seem obscure, but it was very related. Like he had so much, he had inherited so much trauma from World War II. And because of his father having escaped just in time, and he, so again, it can seem odd, but the father was so traumatized and there was so much survivor's guilt that he wasn't really available to father. And then that, it's too complicated to get into, but that translated into this man's sexual issues. But when somebody can see that shame isn't necessarily, if ever, an individual phenomenon, that is huge in itself, because we tend to isolate in our shame by its very nature. We think, I'm the only one who's experienced this. This is because I'm bad in some way. I'm the only one who desires such and such, or can't do such and such, or has done such and such, when it can really be part of a much bigger picture. And as soon as that larger picture is seen and experienced and felt, massive burdening can just fall off someone. So that's one example, but it can also be somebody who literally couldn't feel their body. They couldn't necessarily feel touch or enjoy it. They felt either were dealing with sexual anorexia, like they absolutely didn't want to have sex with their partner. That could be going on for years, and of course that was creating a lot of problems, or actual physical pain with sex. So that's an amazing thing to be able to watch change, and again, really support somebody's journey, however it looks. Like it might take, all kinds of meanderings to get to that place. It's not like, this is a set journey and it looks like this to get from there to here. It's more like, can you be with yourself and your partner with whatever is going on in any given moment, and really stay with it and love it and be loved in that experience.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's very nice that you said that, they don't need to go through this journey alone. That's seeking support, and it decreases the feeling of isolation, and of course with somebody that they feel very much comfortable with and can be open with. Have you seen at any moment probably a client coming with a partner or someone that is close to them for constellation work or for support?
Yeah, it's beautiful to work with couples and do constellation work. I have not yet worked doing body work with both parties of a couple, but I certainly know people who do that, and who knows, eventually I might do that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I know you are also so how do you combine constellation work and sexological body work? Because I've heard you use the term body work a lot of times, but I'm wondering, are they already intertwined, or is it something that is separate?
I'm still exploring the answer to that question myself. Yeah. Right now, it tends to be when a client comes, at any given session, we feel out together which feels like the best thing to do together that session. Okay. And because I tend to do one thing or another, because I like to go deeply into something without feeling like, oh, okay, we've done that, now let's do some of this, and then we'll go do some of that. So it tends to be, so far anyway, we do one thing or another. And sometimes somebody just wants a fantastic bodywork session that isn't about sexual trauma or anything. Just because that's another really important thing. People can get very fixated on sexuality and feeling genital pleasure, for example, when really the body isn't that available. And I love to really help somebody's body, like clear out a bunch of the crap that gets in there from tension and daily use and misuse, so that the body wakes up. And because ultimately that's in my experience is what sexuality is about, is having the whole body be part of the experience, not just, oh, I just do that to your genitals and you do that to mine, So it really depends on, it's a custom made
Awesome.
day-to-day concoction.
Yeah. Awesome, awesome. So we're coming to the end of our interview. I was wondering if you have any last words, words of guidance, insight to offer our audience.
I think I would just want to repeat what we spoke about at the beginning, that this challenge of not just being in a body, which is how culturally we tend to look at it, like our bodies are sort of like cars that we, drive around in, or that drive us around. While we're alive, we are our bodies. They are us. And the more we experience them in detail, sensationally and emotionally and spiritually, the more we can bring through our souls and radiate through our tissues, what people call higher self. And not just that, I mean, this is my personal cosmology, but I really feel like heaven on earth is so much about really bringing energy through and anchoring consciousness through our bodies, bringing all that energy down, and bringing it to this earth that needs that healing as much as most of us need it in our bodies.
That was so beautiful.
Yeah. So again, I think it's such a courageous path, and I really thank you for bringing, all the more awareness, and all these wonderful people I'm sure who are going to be speaking, because this is the cutting edge. This is the cutting roundness of our, I believe, our historic process. So thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Alexandra.
Yeah, thank you as well, because this is something new, it's something different, and as you say, it's being more, I don't want to use the word popularity, but because I can't get any other word, it's going to become more popular in the US, and that's a wonderful thing to have alternative ways of healing and a variety of ways that people can pick, so they could heal in a way that is comfortable to them.
Yep.
It's great.
Yeah.
So I know you have a free gift for our audience.
Yeah. I want to offer the first 20 people a half-hour exploration session over Skype, which a lot can be done and experienced that way. And then if I finish an article I'm working on, I will offer that to everybody else. So
awesome.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah.
And talk to you soon.
I look forward to that. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All righty.
Bye. Bye.